Okay, this is chapter 47 of The Night Singer. 47. It took Hannah no more than 15 minutes to throw together a report on Petrie Forsland's call. She stared at the closing words at Petrie's description of the man he had seen with Joel. Rebecca still hadn't called, and all Hannah wanted was for the interview with Axel Stanston to be over and done with. Maybe then she would pluck up the courage to call Rebecca, particularly if Axel confessed. She couldn't help but hope, despite knowing, deep down, that he never would, no matter how guilty he was. Eric came running over to her desk and slapped down a couple of printouts in front of her. The first was a black and white photograph of a car. "Aren't you supposed to be in the interview now?" she asked. "Soon." He nodded toward the car. "That's Axel Stanston driving over the Olin Bridge on Tuesday, May 14th, after he left his office that evening." Hannah picked up the image and studied it, a shifting gradient of darkness and light. The car's registration plate was clearly visible. She grabbed the second image. It was an enlargement of the car's windshield, and she could see Axel Stanston staring out from behind the glass. There was no doubt about it. It was him, and she felt a sudden trembling longing, a longing to call Rebecca and tell her that she knew how Joel had died. "I want you in the interview with me," said Eric. "But..." "Yes," he interrupted her. "I've already discussed it with Daniel, and Ove agrees. I think there's a chance Axel will talk to you." Hannah wasn't quite so sure, but she didn't say anything. She wanted to join the interview. Time would pass much quicker there than it would be waiting at her desk, and she also wanted to see Axel's face when confronted with the images. "I booked the video recording room, but maybe it's best if I go and get him myself." Hannah nodded and got up. The window was open, and she could smell a slight hint of gas on the breeze, casting her back to the last night's dream. This time she was slightly removed from the action, and the man was no longer simply a dark shadow. It was her father. She saw him looking down at the bloody, beaten body lying motionless on the ground before dousing it in gas and setting the house alight. Hannah had to steady herself against the desk to stop herself from collapsing. "You okay?" asked Eric. "Just a bit dizzy," she replied. "I stood up too fast." Eric took a deep breath, and Hannah thought he was about to demand that she tell him what was going on in her head. "Do you have any plans this evening?" he asked instead, smiling at her. "Why?" Hannah slowly let go of the desk. Did she really want to make small talk about her free time right now? They had an interview to do. "My wife wants to know if you'd like to come over." Panicked, Hannah desperately tried to think of an excuse. "Me too, obviously," he continued. "Surprised Mom cooks so much food we can't eat it all, and I thought that, after today, never mind. So, what do you say?" She knew exactly what he was thinking, and it had nothing to do with food. It was about getting to know each other. She and Eric had been working closely over the past few days, and that would likely continue going forward. Hannah knew she should make more of an effort, but there was just so much else going on right now. Besides, she still thought he was an idiot for telling Ove about the threatening phone calls. "I can't tonight, actually," she told him. "I'm having dinner at a neighbor's." A lie. She had no plans at all, but she didn't care to admit that she just didn't have the energy. "Shame," said Eric. "Another time, then?" "Absolutely." He managed to keep quiet all the way to the corridor, a distance of just a few meters. "Who's the neighbor?" Was he trying to scrutinize her lie? Hannah batted back the suspicion. "Her name's Ingrid." "What does she do?" "She's retired now, but she used to be a farmer." Eric turned to look at her, and she realized that he might actually think she was joking. But about what? "That's something I want to hear more about sometime," he said, heading off toward the cells. Hannah got the interview room ready and then sat down to wait. Eric arrived a few minutes later with Axel Stanston and his lawyer. Axel's right arm seemed to twitch as though he wanted to reach out and shake her hand, but instead he sat down in the other armchair. "Nice to see you again," he said. Hannah met his eye. "I'm afraid the feeling isn't mutual." Her words made him laugh, though his lawyer didn't seem anywhere near as amused as he took a seat on the hard wooden chair to one side of his client. "I hope you realize this can't go on," he said. Hannah ignored him, her eyes still on Axel. "Did you have a good night?" she asked. He wasn't wearing the same clothes as yesterday, so she assumed his lawyer must have brought him a fresh change. Axel didn't look like he had struggled to sleep, but he seemed to appreciate the question. "I've had better," he said. Any epiphanies overnight?" "A few," said Axel, "but none about guilt, if that's what you were hoping for. I didn't kill Joel. He was my son." "What did you do after you left the office on Tuesday?" asked Eric. "I'm afraid I can't say." Not good enough. I thought you would have understood that by now. No, it's you two who don't understand. This thing you are doing, whatever it is, you don't want to talk about it, said Hannah. It didn't by chance take place on Oland, did it? Axel's eyes narrowed, but before he had time to say anything, Hannah held up both pictures. 1 second, that was all it took for his lawyer to request a moment with his client. Hannah and Eric left the room. Daniel could have done this, you know, said Hannah, or you. Yeah, said Eric, but it felt good, didn't it? She nodded. Proof was the only thing that might work on Axel Stanston. After a few minutes, the lawyer popped his head out into the corridor and told them they could come back in. Okay, let's try this again, said Eric. What did you do once you left the office? I drove to Morbelonga, Axel replied. And what did you do there? I met the chair of the local housing committee. Hannah felt like something had come crashing down inside her, the certainty of Axel's guilt that had filled her as they waited outside. Surely he wouldn't lie about something that could be easily contradicted. Hannah stopped the collapse by clinging on to one of the remaining glimmers of hope that the chair of the housing committee might have some reason to give him a fake alibi. After all, one of their own technicians had voluntarily manipulated CCTV footage for him. In the middle of the night, she said, Yes, there was a bit of a crisis. I bought some land in the south of Oland, and I'm planning to build a resort there. And why couldn't you tell us that? It would put the entire project at risk. Hannah felt a sudden wave of frustration at Axel's nature. Your son is dead, she said. Surely the most important thing should be helping us with our investigation. Exactly. He's dead, and nothing can change that. I had to save the project. Is the land you bought in Gronkhogen? Axel studied her with pursed lips. How do you know that? He eventually asked. I've got my sources. Hannah smiled as she thought about Ingrid, which seemed to trigger Axel. This can't get out, he said, leaning forward. Not yet. It could ruin everything. The lawyer placed a hand on his arm, and Axel sat back in his armchair. What's the name of the chair of the committee? Asked Eric. Groen Olander. Sit pretty while we give him a call. Fine, said Axel, though he didn't sound happy about it. As Eric called Olander, Hannah leaned back against the wall outside the interview room. She could see the answer on his face before he even spoke. Groen Olander confirms that he met Axel Stanston in Morbelonga at midnight. The meeting went on for over 2 hours. Hannah searched for some hope to cling onto. Olander could still be lying, but she couldn't find anything. Instead, she walked off to the bathroom. She needed to be alone.